Welcome to Shoot, Shovel, and Shut Up, Socrates.
Socrates. Welcome to Shoot, Shovel, and Shut Up, Shakespeare.
Welcome to Shoot, Shovel, and Shut Up, Salmonella.
Gosh. Welcome to the podcast that will probably decide the name of as we're sitting here recording the first episode.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. And you'll probably know whenever the podcast comes out. And because it'll hopefully have a name with it.
We'll call this one the Nameless episode of the Nameless podcast.
Sure.
So, the reason we're doing this is one, because it's really fun, but also because both Donevan and I are products of failed podcasts.
Well, hang on. I'm still a little hopeful about the other one.
Which one?
The Con and Don variety show.
Move on.
I'm not. Anyway, my name is Donovan, and I was the co-host of the Con and Don variety show, which may or may not come back. If it does, I'll let you know, and I'll just be hosting two podcasts. One of them might be better than the other, but who's to say? We've only been doing this one for about a minute.
My name is Orrin Jones. Most people know me as OT.
Otizzle.
Orrin Topanga, Oliver Twist, Overtime, Old Testament, Old Timer. And I am of the Never Was podcast, Rock Talk Actual, which is an offshoot of the Instagram page, Rock Movers Actual, where me and my friend Sean roll rocks on the mountainside. We recorded 2 episodes, neither of which have aired, because Sean has decided that he doesn't like them. Which, I suppose, he has equal say in the podcast as I do, but I liked them. So, who knows? Maybe the listeners, if they like this, can write to Sean on Instagram and tell him to release the hidden episodes. Maybe he will.
I feel like not liking your own podcast is almost saying you don't like Subway. Because people who don't like Subway, it is entirely their fault because Subway gives you exactly what you ask them to make you.
I was about to ask where the heck
if you don't like your own podcast, it is your fault because you were the one that made it. So, Sean, I hope you're happy and I hope you enjoy listening to this one.
Oh, so hold on. Let me get.
We actually love Sean. I don't want them to think that I'm
No,
a big fan of Sean.
I'm not better at all.
I just like throwing shade.
So let me get this straight. You go to a Subway and you don't just order off the menu. You make your own sub.
That's the beauty.
That is the beauty. But
they put whatever you want on the sub.
That's true, but they've already got like a host of artisanally crafted sub sandwiches, optimally crafted to support one another in flavor and texture. And you think you can do better?
Sometimes they just don't tingle my taste buds. And I go in with a hankering for an idea that I dreamt up at some point or another. Okay. And I know that they're going to make exactly what I want.
Fair enough. We need to go to Subway together. I think it's just dawned on me that we have not ordered subs together. Which, if you haven't ordered subs with a man, can you count him a friend?
Guess we're not friends.
You think you know a guy. Anyway, what are we talking about today, Donnie?
I don't know. Before we get any further, we have a Braden behind the camera. For anyone who listens to the Joe Rogan podcast, he is our Jamie. We'll probably post on the Instagram at some point trying to come up with a cool nickname for him so that we can refer to Braden as something other than Braden.
Oh, yeah.
But
so
Bray-Wow.
No. For those of you out there who speak
Bray Cheddar. I don't know.
For those of you out there who speak Spanish, known as sounds, French. Is it French?
Okay. Known.
So for those of you, if known as is a Spanish word, what does it mean in English? And if any of you out there speak French, also what does it mean in English? And maybe we'll just call them that.
Only there was a platform that you just type in, what is this in a different language, and it'll tell you. But we have people for that.
He is for that.
Maybe one day, write that down. That's a good idea.
Done.
Okay, yeah, back to your question. What are we talking about today?
This is a question that has haunted me since this time yesterday, when we decided today was going to be the day we'd record this podcast.
Yeah, well, let's talk about like why we're wanting to start it.
Okay, I can do that.
I think we both lead interesting enough lives of, we both
Not
enjoy.
to be conceited.
No. But I mean, it's like thinking about this like podcast. It's not for anybody, I think, other than the three of us in this room.
Mm-hmm.
And if it only ends up just being us getting to talk to each other about things that we find interesting or just topics that are very important to us, like
That's
it's
a
just
win.
us having a good conversation, and then we get to put it out. Okay, so Braden looked up what does nones mean in French. It means nuns.
Like the Catholic nuns.
Yes, Nuns.
All right, look up what it means in Spanish. Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of looking at it because my desire to be in a podcast, one, I listen to podcasts all the time. And every time I'm listening to a podcast, I always go, odd, the odd nun. Known as in Spanish means odd. ODD.
The odd nun. Anyway,
Braden, our odd nun.
we like listening to podcasts.
Which is funny because he's neither celibate nor a woman.
Yeah, neither of those. But he is odd.
Yeah, so I love listening to podcasts. We both do. And I always listen to podcasts going, man, I could do that. Not that I like, I could do that better, but more to say, I'm like, man, I can talk. I can, and I feel like I can talk about interesting things. And it always makes me think, man, if I started a podcast, what would I talk about? And I'm still at a point now where we're recording our first episode. I'm not entirely sure. But I do know that whenever I would describe wanting to start a podcast, it would always be around the topics of, man, I feel like I've learned so much being a young man in the past 3 years of my life. And I'd love to have a platform where I got to discuss that with a fellow young man and then share that knowledge with anybody who cared to listen. I feel like I've got some things figured out partially to share, but then there's also loads of stuff that I want to learn. And so what I think this podcast can do is be an awesome platform to have interesting guests on. We live in a unique place that we have access to a lot of very interesting, wise, and successful people. And I think it's going to be really cool to have them on.
I think also we are both in very unique circumstances as people in our 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got married as a 22-year-old, and you've also been through a lot just as a 25-year-old?
Yep.
25. Yeah.
Been around for a quarter century, baby.
Yeah. And like I was handed a lot of responsibility also as a very young person. I guess not like very young, but as someone in my 20s where
I think it's important to say for our culture.
Yes, for our culture.
Because there are people back, in the 50s and earlier where, like they were doing what we're doing in like their teens. So
but nowadays it's not.
It's different. It's hard. Yeah, it's weird. But I think you're right. Both of us have,
like most people my age are not married and have not yet graduated college, but I am running pretty much overseeing all of like the plumbing and HVAC and anything else they decide to throw at me at this multi-million-dollar camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing that since I was 20 and have just had to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've done a pretty okay job of that.
Learned a lot too.
Yeah, learned a whole lot. Definitely messed up a lot and learned that I have to grow up and
communication skills.
Learn to communicate, learn to own my mistakes and not try to sweep them under the rug or blame somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Even if somebody else did something wrong, it's just like, well, that still fell under the purview of my responsibility.
Correct. Yep.
And so, how can I take ownership of this to make sure it don't happen again, even though I wasn't the one who did it? I think that's a really good lesson to learn, and one that's I've been learning daily.
Yeah. And also, I want to keep referencing Braden behind the camera. He is. Are you 23? He's 23,
Oh,
and
frick,
he
I'm
is
the old man in
a
this group.
youth pastor, and has been a youth pastor for how many years? 3 years. Very stellar guy, very wise,
If anything, I feel like I'm
very
the
good
one
at
falling
teaching.
behind. You guys got to figure it out. Married, one's got a kid.
Nah, man, dude, you're doing good.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
doing some stuff.
The boring answer for me right now, I'm working as a sales rep and estimator for a security company. I sell cameras, security systems, fire alarms, burglar alarm systems, so like contacts on doors, windows, keypads. Um, and I started that in August. And so it's been really cool to learn. It's December now, and I just completed my first sale completely independently of my supervisor today. And that was awesome. And so it's been good because I had a lot of doubt going into the workforce from college. I didn't graduate college. We'll get into that at a later episode, I'm sure. I haven't thought enough about it to really do that part justice.
Right, yeah.
But like a lot of people, I'm sure that are listening to this, if a lot of people indeed end up listening to it, college can be um, stressful, not just because of college itself, but because of the perspective of like, okay, what comes next? And I know that especially for my last 2 years at college, I was really stressed out by the thought of I leave college and now I've got to make it in the world. And I feel like I'm not really succeeding at college. How in the world am I going to succeed in the real world? And so it's been a real big confidence booster to just step into this position where really I have no experience. I didn't know anything about cameras or how to set up a system or how to communicate with other professionals in the industry. At least I felt like I didn't. And it's been really awesome to, one, learn a lot. I've gotten a lot wrong, but it's all been great opportunities to learn and to learn how to not make the same mistake twice. And big confidence booster to where now, like, I feel like I'm succeeding way more and a lot faster than my 22 to 23-year-old self would have imagined being wrapped up in self-doubt while I was in college.
Right.
And so if there's one lesson to take away in that, for me, it's always been eat the elephant one bite at a time. If you try to digest an entire elephant at once, one, it's just impossible, and two, if you did do it, it would kill you. So most things in life are the elephant that you've killed, and they're trying to eat it. Right? My dad loves that saying. He'd always say, "Warren, quit trying to eat the elephant one bite at a time." And that would be my biggest, like, whether I was trying to learn the violin, or working on math problems, or making a model airplane. At some point in that process, the whole the perspective of the entirety of the project would overwhelm me, and I'd be like, "There's no way I'm going to do this," because I'd try and do it all at once, and every single day almost I have to see that and then go, "Quit being an idiot," because nobody could do that in a day.
Oh yeah.
So just do the day's work. And I think that working this job, this real job, has given me real life skills where, yeah, I mean, I can see where my supervisor's at, who I'm being trained to operate at a similar level as. And I'll hear him on the phone talking to an Atlanta United States Postal Service distribution center about all of the different nodes and wires and systems and cameras and the way their doors lock together. And I'm just like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to have this conversation. I'm like, okay, hold on, pump the brakes. He's been working in this for the past 12 years.
Oh yeah, I was at that point working here because there's about a 10-year age gap between me and everybody else that's at my level, other than the guy that I hosted that other podcast with, Connor Long. Where I was like, I feel like I don't have any of it together. I look around me and I see that everybody else has it together. But also, I just have to remember, like, they've been doing this thing a whole lot longer than I have. Even just the being an adult thing.
Yeah.
And living on, I guess, like living on my own, like living outside of my parents' house. Just starting my own life, my own family.
Making your own decisions.
I can't expect to do it perfectly, but we're both surrounded by people who have made it past probably all the mistakes we are currently making in these years and in these moments. And what we can do is look at those people, talk to those people, first learn how to talk to those people. And really the best way to talk to those people is just to not talk to them, but just listen to what they have to say.
Yep.
Because, I mean, what they have to say probably is more beneficial. What they have to say to you is probably more beneficial than what you have to say to them. And so if you find yourself in that kind of scenario, we're talking to somebody older and wiser than you, just shut up and listen.
Mm-hmm.
That was the third in our name.
Yeah.
Shoot, shovel, shut up.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's Shakespeare.
Yeah. Shakespeare comes after learning how to shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a huge one. I remember talking to my dad, and I was like, which I'm going to try not to be repetitive with that, but he's a well of wisdom.
We should just have him on.
Oh, we do.
And then neither of us talk. Just bring one microphone next time.
Pin this daggum lapel microphone on Muggs' collar.
What if be like, go, and then hand it to him?
Anything he says is going to be gold. But yeah, like... Okay.
Clip it to his goatee.
Oh.
Just be dangling right here.
If I could grow a goatee like Matt Jones.
If I could grow just anything on my face.
Anyway, he would say... He taught me that it's, like you were just saying, it's better to be quiet when you're around older men. Not because they don't care about what you have to say, but a lot of times if you're saying anything other than a question, it is probably something that is incredibly elementary to them, no matter what you do. And that's not at all our fault. You know, it's just the station of life. And so the sooner we can become aware of that as young men, the sooner we can get ourselves into a position to learn.
Yep.
And I think, yeah, if we bring this kind of full circle in the small, digression we've gotten of just communicating with older adults, is I cringe really hard when I think back about the times where I've tried to have adult conversations with adults as a younger me.
Oh, yeah.
And because I've realized that, man, I was trying so hard to sound like them, when it's impossible, because no matter how hard I try to imitate it, I don't have the life's well of experience to back it up. And to anybody who is in that realm of experience, who I'm imitating, it's obvious that I'm imitating them. And so there's no point there, because I'm thus trying to show something that I'm not. And so there's no shame for young people in general to just be quiet around older people. I think in our culture, not to just dump on our culture, because every culture's got its issues, but our culture's got an issue with respecting other people's opinions at large, but especially older people's opinions. Like, the meme, boomer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, boomer. Like, yeah, I see where it came from and why that became a thing. But that really annoyed me when it first came out, because I only grew up around people who I wasn't just taught to respect, but they earned my respect by, like, I was made to respect them for sure, as, their child or as them being my mentor. But also they were people who earned it as well. And so I would hope that I'd never be in a situation where I just dismiss what an older person was saying to me, even if I felt they were wrong. Respect them enough not to tell them they're wrong to their face. Really internalize what they're saying, and if you feel that they are wrong, bring it up to them later and say, I did not understand what you meant by that. Can you explain it to me? That's going to be a much more profitable conversation than just saying, I think you're wrong.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for me to forget that, like, let's say I want to impress, let's just go ahead and keep talking about your dad. Let's say I want to impress your dad, mm-hmm. because I respect him a lot. My first instinct is to try to make myself seem like somebody he wants to be around, but
to display competence somewhere.
Right. And I can still do that,
mm-hmm.
or it doesn't need to be displayed, and I don't need to prove that I am a competent person, because if I'm trying to prove that I'm a competent person, that's just revealing every insecurity that I have. But what the better thing to do would be in the long run is to just show that you have humility, and that You
Yeah.
are teachable. And if you display those two things and just show like a willingness to learn and you humble yourself to their wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
like he will give you the advice to turn you exactly into the man that he thinks is like a good man.
The man that
Like
that you're trying
the
to
man
impress
that you're
him by
trying to
being.
impress him by being.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the counterintuitive thing about it, because the natural reaction is to try and be something you're not.
just shut up and quit trying to impress him. And
Right.
hey, because the
And
reason
that's going to
why,
impress him.
right? Yeah. And then
Oh
he
man,
will.
this person's willing enough to be quiet and learn. That's humility.
And then he will turn you exactly into the person that you're trying to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, for anybody listening out there, if you've got that person in your life who you really look up to, and they're a role model and a mentor figure, forget the whole, man, what am I going to say around them to sound like I'm worthwhile? If they are worthwhile to be a mentor in your life, you don't have to convince them they're worthwhile, that you are worthwhile, right? Because if they're a decent human being, they're going to look at you with value no matter what. And so go up to them. And if you have an awesome opportunity to reach out, also mentor people in general. Love it when younger people reach out to them and say, hey, I've got this thing that I'd love to run by you because I just want to learn. It's like I've had great opportunities to say, to ask if I could get lunch with somebody, who's older, and just talk to them about what they've learned, and people who are worth getting to know and submitting to in a mentor role are going to jump at that opportunity. And so just manage to humble yourself, so that and allow yourself to try and be as real as possible. Just like, man, this is the kind of person I want to be. So I'm not going to try to pretend that I'm that person, because if I want to be that person now, that means I'm not that person yet.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so it's just like you were saying, we don't need to beat a dead horse, but yeah, be humble enough to say, all right, this is not who I am. This is who I want to become. And it looks a lot like the way this person is doing it. So I want to talk to them about how they managed it. And a lot of that is not going to be talking to them, but listening to them. And so I think if there's one lesson I wish I had learned better as a younger man, is being quiet around older people, no matter how important it is you think what you are thinking is to share.
Because I've been in scenarios where I thought I had something really important to say, and I said it, and I sounded like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
You been there?
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst.
Yeah, and it might just be because you didn't know how to say it. It might have been a good thought, but then also it could just be that it was a dumb thought.
Yeah. Especially like working here, there's so many times where like, we do like a men's conference.
Mm-hmm.
Keep looking at the camera. Sorry. We'll do like a men's conference, and the people that come to that is there's like really cool people, like people who are like ex-military, like ex-special forces, or some guys from the FBI that like come in.
Mm-hmm. Guys in
and
ministry.
Like, yeah, guys in ministry, just
a load of different guys.
Just really cool people, and we'll have like a fire, and all of us will get to sit around it, and they'll like just be telling these like awesome stories. And it's really hard not to be like, oh my gosh, they're telling a cool story. I have to think of a cool story to impress them. It's like, obviously, like, you don't need to do that. Just enjoy listening and enjoy not talking. Because I put so much pressure on myself to be like, oh gosh, I gotta say something. Like, I'm the only person putting that pressure on myself to try to impress anybody.
Yeah, no, I love that, where it's like you said, the guys that come in who are like in the FBI, where it's like, oh, you're in the FBI? I too shoot a gun. But it's just like, no matter what you've done with a gun, what kind of drills you've done, like, unless you say, oh man, hey, I've been learning how to shoot. I've been working on the bill drill or the progressive round count, and say it in a way where it's just like, obviously they know what that is, and it's not like you're not teaching them anything. You just you say that so that you can just say, what have been your favorite drills to run, and then just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But don't say, so one time I was at the range.
Or just be like, so I've been getting into shooting. What are some good drills you'd like to recommend so I can get better? Or something like that. And then you just establish
which
that
sounds so easy
relationship
talking as a podcast right now, but that is hard to do.
Yeah,
in the moment, because you're right. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves to perform well in those social environments.
Yeah.
And it just backfires dramatically.
Yeah. That it does.
All right, so we've covered social interactions. What can a young man do practically to improve his health?
To improve himself?
I'm thinking with physical activities. This is the shovel aspect.
Well, obviously, roll rocks.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, that is the epitome, I think, of... Not the epitome. There's other things. But I would label it as type 2 fun.
Absolutely. Oh, it's a keystone.
Let's talk about type 2 fun.
Oh, that's a great idea. A great way for a young man to... Anybody, but we're going to focus on young men because that's what we are. Yeah, I'm gonna leave talking about women to you guys because you're married.
Sure.
I'll talk about young men. But anyway, I think one of the best ways for a young man to develop himself is to seek out type 2 or tier 2 fun. And if you're not familiar with this concept, the man of meat eater fame, Steven Ranella, introduced me to this concept. And it was in an episode of his hunting show, and they're on a week-long bear hunt for a grizzly bear in the Canadian wilderness. And it's in the middle of the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies. It's really cold, it's really foggy, it's really wet, and it's like day 5. And they have yet to see a bear, right? And they're all huddled up underneath this tarp. And he's like, he's talking not to the camera, of course. They have but they have this conversation, and it's always impacted me afterwards, where he says, "This is the kind of fun that lasts, because it sucks. It's not fun in the moment, but you go. Let's say, and it's not to say that roller coasters can be type 2 fun for some people, but let's say just like an amusement park, right? You go there and you have a lot of laughs and a lot of smiles all day. But generally, you don't hold on to those experiences as meaningful. Whereas you go out with a bunch of guys, and for instance, me and Camden and a bunch of other interns from Snowbird, I'm talking about Stephen and Matthew and Malachi.
Yeah.
If you know, you know. But we went out, and it's in the middle of December, and we rafted the Chattooga. And that was miserable. Like, we were shivering the whole time. But, and it was terrifying too, because we were dropping in on like 6 foot to 8 foot massive rapids. But at the same time, I look back at that and I'm like, man, that was way more fun than sitting on my phone for a Saturday.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right, looking back, like so to say, this is a very long explanation, but type 2 fun, Stephen Ranella, back to his point, is just like they're going to look back on that miserable bear hunt, whether or not they killed a bear, as really fun. They're going to laugh about it. It's like, oh man, remember when we were freezing and soaking wet under that tarp on the side of a Rocky Mountain hillside? You're going to remember that with so much more fondness and so much more pride than you ever will. I don't know, winning a prize at a state fair. And so type 2 fun or tier 2 fun is this concept of seeking out hard things. Working out can be even tier 2 fun. For me, that's not. It's just a discipline. I hate it.
Working out has never been fun, but
it's good.
I'm glad I do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has never gotten easier to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, because that is the only time I have to actually go work out.
Yeah.
And it is always just as difficult to get up as the previous day. I've never woken up and been like, man, I'm so excited to go work out at 5:30 while it's still dark outside, and I could still sleep for another 2 hours.
But a lot of people say, man, they finish their workout and they go, it was worth it. Most of the time I finish a workout and I question whether or not it was worth it. But anyway, that brings us back to rolling rocks, because rolling rocks is a good exercise. And it's fun.
It is
For me,
fun.
anyway, it's a lot more fun than lifting weights or exercising, going for a run.
I mean, if anybody's looked at the Instagram, they saw, I don't even remember what we named it. The one that I joined in on. We'll have to bring that back.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Link
but
in the description.
like I got
I've
there,
always wanted to say that. Link in the description.
good job. Like I got there and was like, there's no way I can move this rock. It is too big. And Sean was just like,
It's on your
dude,
head.
it's on your head.
Literally.
And like I struggled to lift it and was like, no, man, it's too heavy. And he's like, it's just because you're like telling yourself it's too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, like finally, I was like, all right, I guess I'm just telling myself it's too heavy. And I started lifting, and I felt pain. But I was like, this pain isn't like enough to like stop me from lifting. It's literally just distracting me from like how much energy I actually have. And so I just kept lifting until eventually it rolled. And I just had like an adrenaline rush because I'm like, whoa, I just moved this giant rock.
Dopamine.
So
Immediate dopamine.
they're just doing something that you thought that you wouldn't be able to do, and it doesn't actually seem fun, but you're doing it with like, your friends, and they're having a good time, and we're all yelling at each other and hyping each other up. It's like, all right, this sucks, but we're all doing it, and we cannot wait to tell people that we are doing it.
Right.
It's like all you want to do is just talk about the really crappy thing you just did, because even though it was crappy, it was like still really fun.
You're proud that you ended up doing it.
You're proud about it. To any band kids out there too,
yeah, there
like
you go.
that's like what band camp is like.
All about. It's what it's all about.
Like picture being in high school and you're on like the blacktop in the parking lot. For me, I was on drum line, so I'm carrying a 45-pound drum on my chest for 15 hours a day, just like nonstop, and I'm going home like exhausted at the end of each day. But like at the end of it, we created something really cool that tens of thousands of people came out to enjoy and like just to watch on their like Friday night at a football game or like their Saturday night at a competition or something. But just like in the moment, I remember being like, why do I do this to myself? But then now looking back on it, it's like, man, I wish I could go back.
Well, as Teddy Roosevelt once said, and he said a lot of good things. I don't know if it's Teddy's original quote, but when I read the quote, it had Teddy Roosevelt's name written under it.
Probably Shakespeare.
Doubt it.
Yeah, probably.
But he said, nothing in life is worth having. Nothing in life worth having is ever gained without effort. And so if it's really easy to do, chances are, and not to say that doing things that aren't effort-inducing are never worth doing, but like anything in life worth having, any position, any experience, any object even, if it's worth having, it likely has a price tag, and that price tag usually is more than money. and so, man, if your life, like I always ask myself, does my life reflect putting a lot of work in to get meaningful things, or doing bare minimum to pursue things that distract me from meaningful things? And it's so easy to just distract myself with meaninglessness from meaningfulness. Like when we do things like sit on our phone and scroll, it's not because that's deeply satisfying. It's because it is distracting us from reminding the hole in us wanting to be satisfied. Like it's just, I thought of a really nerdy example.
Just do it.
If you heat your house with wood, if you don't use oak or ash or thorn wood, then you're constantly filling your stove with subpar wood that is not going to burn as hot, is not going to leave good ashes or good coals, and is going to gunk up your chimney.
Like you can create a huge fire with lighter fluid,
right? But
unless you keep dumping lighter fluid, it's gonna go out.
Yeah. So I heated my dad. When we lived in Wisconsin, we heated our house with wood. I remember the first year we did it, we had this big pile of wood behind our house that we knew we had to get rid of, but most of it was popple wood or aspen. Some people call it that. Poplar wood. It's really light. It's really mushy, spongy, but we knew we had to get rid of it. And I'll never forget how different it was heating our house the next year with oak wood. And And it's like, man, I put almost the same amount of effort, into both of these things, but one was so much more valuable. And so it's just like, this is kind of a different analogy, I guess. Now we're switching pages, but learning to prioritize time, where it's just like, all right, both of these things are kind of similar. Go after go after the thing that's going to produce better results. So anyway, but that's a side topic. Um, so we've rambled on enough, I think. I want to talk about shooting.
Yes.
Shooting is something that Donovan and I do together quite a lot.
Quite a lot.
Quite a lot. Sorry. Quite a lot. I do speak.
Or quite a bit.
I think that's what I was saying, and the two words coalesced in my brain.
It's okay. We all make mistakes. Except for me.
Such a shame. You'll never learn.
Yeah, we shoot a lot together.
I mean, a lot compared to the average human being, probably.
Yeah. We're always
but not a lot compared to our idols.
For fun, but also for preparedness.
That's right.
For training.
Yeah.
I was actually hoping we would talk about this. And I want to talk a little bit too just about EDC stuff.
That means everyday carry.
Yeah, like in concealed carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Because since I've started concealed carrying, I get a lot of people asking me, like, why do you concealed carry? Like, what's the point? When are you ever going to use it? Why do you shoot so much if you're probably never going to get into an altercation with somebody where you actually have to, like, pull your gun and potentially
defend yourself?
Right.
Like, is it the correct economy of your time? Like, is the risk
of your time, of your money?
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth
thinking through the mental reps?
Yeah, the mental reps, just constantly being like alert and aware whenever you're out in public. Like, I feel like I'm always looking over my shoulder, or anytime I go into a building, I'm like always knowing where the exits are, or even just sitting down in a restaurant trying to face the door, that kind of stuff. A lot of people would think it's useless.
Or we have a conversation, we're telling somebody this is how we think, and it sounds either exhausting or paranoid, or both. And I think what's so important to realize is, I would rather be I don't feel I'm ever paranoid. I feel I'd be way more paranoid if I didn't prepare for those types of events. You know what I mean? Because I don't have not experience, but I don't have those mental reps of imagining a potential situation where I have to defend myself. It's just this gray void where I've never done a thought experiment of how that could go down.
And for me, I'm not really paranoid. I'm just kind of like, I guess it could come across that way, but I'm just like a people watcher. And I just get very interested by like what people are doing, or like what could this person be thinking, or why would this person, do that thing that they just did, or choose to sit in this area of a building over 90% this area
of the time. 90% of the time, it's not a conscious thought.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is.
And that's just kind of how I was like as a kid, just always trying to like watch people and just kind of figure out like what they're thinking, what their next steps are, just because I thought it was interesting. And I like just seeing what's it called? I like seeing different people's mannerisms, and it's interesting. But as an adult, it's kind of turned into more of like what is this person's intentions with doing like this thing, or again like sitting in this area, or even like wearing that heavy jacket that they're wearing indoors, like that kind of stuff.
Interesting. That's a different perspective than I take on it, for sure.
What's your perspective?
Well, it's always been, for me, it's always been more of a case of not so much watching people. That came after, where I realized, okay, I need to be more observant of just the people around me, because it's so easy to be, on your phone, or just so engaged in a conversation in public that you don't notice people walking by you. And I think for me, it happened the other way around, where when I started carrying, I became so much more aware, because it was like, all right, now I have this responsibility.
Like if something's going down, you got to assume that you are the person with the gun.
Yeah. And it's just like, not just that I have the responsibility to step in and stop every situation, because I think that the majority of situations where there could be a shooter, the responsible thing to do is to get down and get out of there, um, especially if I'm with loved ones. My responsibility is to protect them and get them out of harm's way, not necessarily to seek out the shooter. And so I think for me, it was the other way around, where I loved shooting. I grew up shooting. Some of my favorite memories is, 7, 8 years old, carrying around a BB gun and trying to ace chipmunks, around the house that were getting into the house. And so growing up with guns, I always was just like, well, guns are a part of life. And this is what, now as an adult, this is the natural progression of that, where I got a Glock 19. It's a phenomenal piece of hardware. And I started shooting with it, and I started shooting with guys who knew how to use it. And I started getting trained by guys who knew how to use it. And I think the byproduct of that for me was a desire now, okay, now that I have this new skill of combative shooting, just say that loosely, because combat shooting is a very serious thing, and unless you experience it, you have to talk with it. You have to hold it in very loose hands of what the definition of combat shooting is. But
Yeah.
shooting to preserve your life, it's a very serious thing. But after training to attempt to prepare yourself for combat shooting, I think the natural byproduct is you have this new sense of confidence and also gravity of how quickly a situation can go poorly. And so now that I carry a gun, I'm like, okay, even if I'm not carrying a gun, just the experience of always having one on me, or is like has tuned me to be like, I want to avoid a situation where a violent encounter happens at all costs, because taking a life is really serious, and I don't want to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why this is a long conversation. We're not going to get into it, but we will at some point. Gun control is so dumb, I think, because the only reason I bring it up in the context of this conversation is, I think that for me, having a gun and carrying it has made me a safer and more responsible person. Did I think that then transferred, like that's across the board true for all people? Not necessarily, but I know it's been really good for me, and I'm so thankful I have the freedom to make that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so for anyone out there who thinks that people conceal carry because it validates their masculinity, yes, there's always an outlier where that is true. But I think that by and large, people who carry are largely people who are going to be self-reliant, humble, and scared to death of, not scared to death, that's the wrong way of putting it, but conscious of the reality of how quickly things can get turned on their head. I give one example. There was a shooting recently out in Raleigh where this 15-year-old kid snapped out of nowhere. Like, I'm sure for maybe his family members, it wasn't necessarily out of nowhere, but it was definitely not expected. And he dons camo, he grabs his shotgun, he murders his brother, and then he walks out his front door. And until the police stop him, he shoots a man sitting in his car. He shoots two ladies walking down a forest path, and multiple other people I can't remember specifically, but I remember specifically the guy sitting in his car and the two ladies walking down the path. Neither of them, like, the two ladies walking, they're probably enjoying an evening or an afternoon hike, and the guy sitting in his car was probably scrolling his phone. Not condemning him for not being aware, but I'm not calling him an idiot, but I'm just saying, like, the last thing he was thinking was that he was in a combat zone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I hear about those kind of things. And now that I've been shooting in a way where I'm trying to prepare myself to be able to stop a threat against me or loved ones, is I'm like, man, these crazy things, while since there's so many people, it's pretty rare that that would ever happen to us. The last thing I want to do is be caught so unprepared that me or people that I love are killed because of a negligence of, like, and like, it's kind of like Pandora's box. As soon as it's opened and that knowledge is learned, you can't put it away. And so I feel it'd be irresponsible of me now to ignore what I've learned because it's easier, or I have less moral qualms about it. You know,
It'd be ignorant to think that it can't happen to you.
exactly.
And I think
You can forgive ignorance,
mhm.
but you can't forgive willful denial of of reality, which is that there's evil in the world for one, and there's dangerous people who can come out of nowhere. There's dangerous situations come out of it. I mean, we see it all the time with road rage.
Right, yeah. I think I've been more aware of it since getting married.
Mm.
And it's been something that I'm like, all right, I always want to be ready to like protect my family, even to the point where it's like we were sleeping one night and like a bird hit we have like a sliding glass door,
Mm-hmm.
and like a bird ran into it or something. And I thought someone just banged on the door, and I've never been so quick to jump up and just be ready for just somebody trying to like break in or something. And in that moment, I was not at all thinking about myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting to the point where it's like I'm not only thinking about like the well-being of my wife and wanting to protect her, like at all costs, but if I'm in a situation, especially like even working at camp, being on the security team, there's like 500 middle school, high school kids here at a time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, I've been put in responsibility to not only carry to protect myself, which is why I carry day to day, but also to protect the people around me. And in any situation where I thought, okay, something could be going down, like another one that happened at camp was there was a basketball in the middle of the road,
Mm-hmm.
and one of our school buses ran over it, and it
Mm-hmm.
sounded like a gunshot down by the basketball court.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with another guy on the security team on the porch of where we do like worship or like dining, and like we've never been so like we've locked eyes and just eyes were just wide and we were both ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could see it, and I know for a fact he wasn't thinking about defending himself.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't thinking about defending myself. I was thinking about defending the 500 people who I've been put in charge of. And I think I also do that when I go out in public. It's like, all right, I need to assume that I'm the one that is carrying, but not to be the person that flaunts it. It is all like an internal thought that I have of like, all right, if something's going down, I want to be reliable. If something's not going down, I still want to be reliable.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to bring up. And I think it's so easy for people who aren't in the gun world to have this perspective of people who carry guns. Even if they're listening to this conversation now, it's just like, oh, they just do that to validate their insecure masculinity, or it makes them feel better about themselves or whatever. I remember
carrying a gun is cool.
It is, yeah. So up yours. But anyway, like I remember when that shooting in Texas happened.
At the church?
No, not at the church. At the school, Uvalde.
At the school.
I mean, there were a bunch of grade school kids got killed.
Oh yeah.
I remember seeing the faces of those kids that got killed and genuinely saying, I would be more than willing to give up my guns to make sure this would never happen again if I knew that would help.
If it was a guarantee.
It was a guarantee.
Me not having my gun would have thwarted a shooting in Texas.
Yeah. So this has nothing to do, I genuinely believe this has nothing to do with trying to validate some fragile masculinity. I think that a man's role in society is to provide and to protect, and to do so selflessly. Like you were saying, when in the situation where the bird hit your window, the situation where the bus ran over a ball, it's not that you're paranoid, and it's not that you want to make yourself feel better. It's that you want to put yourself in a responsible way in a place where you're able to defend innocent life. And I think that can only be described as admirable. And for those people out there who may think that people who carry guns only do so to validate their own insecurity or because they are paranoid, I would say, yeah, those outliers definitely exist. But I think it would be improper and extremely unnuanced to say that is the broad stroke truth of these are the people who carry guns. It's been completely untrue of all the people that I know who carry guns. In fact, everyone who I say I want to live like them, completely unrelated from firearms, also carry firearms. They're good men who love their families well, who model what it means to be a self-sacrificing, humble, put others before ourselves men. And then they also happen to be really competent and really dangerous with a gun, and you wouldn't want to try and, you know, perpetrate violence against them because they're more than. I love what Jordan Peterson says, and at this point, if you're on Instagram at all, it's a broken record. But I love what he says about being capable of violence. He's like, you should be a monster, but one that's under control.
Holloway talks about velvet covered brick all the time.
Yeah,
like that's what we need to be as men. Is like be someone that's like, approachable and just comforting. It's like you need to be able to. I was about to give like a really dark analogy.
Yeah.
Like if there's like just like if you're like walking on the street and I don't know. I don't even know where. There's definitely a way better analogy I can use. But imagine like a tiny girl who is about to get mugged by a large man. You need to be able to flip the switch to just attack and destroy that man, and then be able to also console,
immediately
and
turn around,
be gentle and
yes.
approachable.
Or like yeah, I think that's great. And to further on to the Jordan Peterson thought line is somebody who's weak in general, just weak of mind, weak of character, weak of body, is going to be incapable of great feats of evil or good. And I guarantee you that somebody who's weak in those areas is going to feel the insecurity and lash out in really petty ways. That's going to be damaging. And I think that's where the term toxic masculinity can truly find its root. A toxic man's going to be a weak man who doesn't develop thick skin, who doesn't develop a hard work ethic, who doesn't develop a knowledge of how to be violent, and also then doesn't understand the value of being gentle. I think some of the most gentle men that I know are also the men that are capable of great acts of violence. It's true in jiu-jitsu too. I've been trying to train myself up in jiu-jitsu because, let's be honest, if you carry a gun and you don't practice martial arts, you're just another man's holster. Chew on that one. Anyway, doing jiu-jitsu, anybody who practices martial arts understands they've got a much greater capacity for understanding the consequences of fighting. UFC fighters are almost never going to get in a fight at a bar because they understand the consequences of violence. The people who get in fights at bars, one, are people dumb enough to go and get drunk at bars, and two, are the people who don't have a context of the potential consequences of a violent encounter. But if you put yourself all the time where you're in a controlled environment and you're training that over and over again, you're only going to use it when it's absolutely necessary. And you're also going to be capable of much better acts of love and gentleness because you know the opposite. You've seen both. So I think it's just, as men, we should strive to put ourselves in hard situations to then develop our, for maybe lack of a better terms, our soft side. And
I like that you said put ourselves in hard situations, because I think for a long time it was easy for me to make excuses of like just towards, I don't know, towards just different like character weaknesses. It's like, all right, like I wasn't, okay, I guess through like high school I was like pretty like, skinny and frail. And it's just because I made the excuse like, well, no one taught me how to work out. It's like I definitely could have gone out and I knew how to do push-ups. I was capable of going for a jog or something. And even just like with developing like leadership skills or just learning how to be like a better man in general. There's plenty of books.
Yes.
Just read. Or if you are small and weak and you want to get stronger, then just go for a jog or do some squats or do some push-ups.
Challenge yourself to do 100 push-ups every day.
Yeah.
Maybe not even all at once. Do 10 sets of 10.
Start taking jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Get involved in like a public sport or something. Like I started playing softball this past year. Although
Better than nothing.
some men would probably have to say something about softball. I had a blast,
Hey, if you're a
and it
man,
challenged me.
yeah.
And I'm
And
mean. If a baseball bat ever
Hey.
got in my hands,
you got a mean right swing.
dude, someone's head is going yard.
Well, and I tell you what, somebody who criticizes you for playing softball but then doesn't do anything,
Yeah,
you're doing more.
other than sits on the couch or something.
Or goes to work and sits on the couch. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, put yourself in a hard situation, no matter what your life circumstances are. Not a hard situation like a dangerous one, but a hard situation is in life, one that's going to make you better.
Mm-hmm.
To take this all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, is tier 2 fun, putting yourself in hard situations. Be a better man by putting yourself through hard things that are specifically, are tailored to making you better, because it's going to make you more disciplined. It's going to make you more loving. It's going to make you more dangerous, and thus capable of protecting, capable of loving, capable of providing. And I think that's going to be a good place to stop for this first episode. But this has given me a great idea from the things we've referenced. Any of you who are listening or watching, because I think Braden is going to put this junk up on the YouTubes, eh? Heck yeah.
Yeah.
The YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you are one of the defenders out there of yourselves and the loved ones around you, after this podcast ends, I want you to do 10 reps of dry fire drills. Make sure you unload your gun entirely. Make sure the ammo is in a separate room. And make sure you point your gun in a safe direction. Because nothing is more awkward than doing dry fire drills that turn out to be really wet.
Oof. Yeah.
Do you have any challenges?
Do something this week that makes you uncomfortable, like reading. I don't know. For me, I'm just bad at reading books, and so that, and also just I'm bad at setting aside time to read a book. So it may be, I try to leave to go to the gym at 5:30, which that alone already makes me uncomfortable. And most of the time I get to the gym, I don't really know how to do some of the stuff that's in my workout, but I figure it out. Because I don't want to let not knowing something stop me from learning how to do something.
Yep.
If you don't know how to do something, just learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But
read a book.
I make the excuse of like not having enough time. Well, then just wake up. I should just wake up at 5 and then go to the gym at 5:30. Read from 5 to 5:30. Go to the gym after 5:30. Get home. Make some good breakfast. Go to work.
Yep. So you want to read books? Make time to read books?
That was just an example. My whole thing was do something uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be different for like person to person. But
if you're good at reading books, go to the gym. If you're good and go to the gym, read a book. If you're not good at either, do both.
If you're good at both of those things, do jujitsu.
Yeah. And learn how to shoot a gun. Me and Donnie both love teaching people how to shoot guns. So hit us up. We love to work people through firearm fundamentals. Anyway, Donnie, you got anything else?
I'm content.
I'm content as well. This has been the Rock Talk Con and Don Variety Show actual, and we are signing off. One more thing for you guys. Actually, for one person in particular. Camden
Short
Schwarting.
dog.
We want you to come on the next podcast. So if you listen to this one and you stayed all the way to the end, we'll see you next week.